look into the costing unit, which is most likely to be the final unit of your level 2 the certificate in accounting qualifications. And this unit now is going to differ from whatever you have already learned on the first part of your level 2 qualification. Most of you would have done bookkeeping, introduction to bookkeeping, and then principle of costing, so principle of bookkeeping control units. And then once you've done them, you would have moved forward to do the business environment unit, which encapsulate the previously learned 2 units plus to include an exam called the synoptic assessment. With that synoptic assessment, once you completed it, you'll be moving on to this PCTN. And you remember the ones you have done already, they're related to the financial accounting. The one you're going to be doing now, it's going to be do with the management accounting. So let's have a look at what other slides we have in play here for you. So the first thing is, what is the principle of costing? What is that going to cover? It is going to be an exam with 7 tasks there. They're all computer marked, and it's for 1 hour 30 minutes. Pass rate is 70%. But unlike the previous exams, this exam will have a sort of a spreadsheet element built within your exam software. That spreadsheet element is going to be similar to Excel, but it is not exactly Excel. It will be something of a software within your exam screen, and you just have to put some formulas and numbers to find the solutions there. So it is very critical you start developing your spreadsheet skills as you go along with your accounting qualification, because I do most of my activities in a spreadsheet, to highlight how critical that is to be a successful accountant. It doesn't matter if it's going to be for financial accounting or for the management accounting. It's all down to how you use spreadsheets. It doesn't matter it has to be Excel or anything. You may have the version from the Apple MacBook. You may also have the Chrome. They have Google Sheets there. They're all spreadsheets, but they are all have the same principles. It is going to be using formulas there. So you need to learn how to do them. And then also that is going to allow you to, streamline your work for long term. And then, of course, saves you valuable time in your workplace. So here, what are the learning outcomes there? We're going to look at understanding the cost regarding system within organization, how the cost recording techniques work, use provided information on budgeted and actual cost and income, and then also use the tools and techniques to support cost calculation, which is going to be the spreadsheets. So as I said, it only says 10% there, but 2 of the questions will have that element embedded into that. Therefore, I will say it's going to be slightly more than 10% because it's only 10% for the formulas, but you need to know the knowledge. So I will say about 20% because you need to make sure you up your skills to that level from wherever you were, but then that is going to be your lifelong learning. You're going to be, thanking whatever you learned from that unit for forever, because you're going to be using that basic knowledge you gained throughout your accounting qualifications. So here we're going to look at 2 differences, or not 2 differences, the difference between 2 different types of accounting. The ones you've done already so far was financial accounting, but what we're going to do, what is the management accounting? What is the purposes of it? Financial accounting, it's going to be dealing with something already happened in the past, and these are done for external users. And you're going to look at the management accounting, that is mostly likely to be internal users. Okay, the people is going to be looking at it as for somebody like a managers to make decisions. Financial accounting are legally required to be done because you need to be submitting your documentations on a timely manner. Management accounting, there is no such a legal requirement there because they're going to be for internal. So the format in that case for financial accounting are set. You need to do those financial statements in a particular format. It cannot be any different than what is being stipulated by the government agencies. Management accountant, you can do that in a back of a post-it note. If you can write that small, you can still do that as a budget there. You can do a costing sheets there. It is no set format for that one. And the nature of information you see in the financial accounting, they are all going to be something called past. They're all facts. Anything for the management accountant, they are all for future. They're speculations. They are all going to be something called for a future projections. And what are the costing systems we use? We're going to look at whatever the cost accounting system for the future, and the past one is going to be all whatever we have already accrued, like accrual concepts and stuff like that way. Time period for financial accountant, there are deadlines. Management accountant, there are also deadlines internally, but you don't have to worry about how long you're going to take because it depends on the business requirement. Financial accounting, though, you may have to do a VAT return in a quarter. You must do that in that quarter. Management accounting, you don't have that such a what do you call a constraint on your times. So let's move on to look at what is the labor cost we're going to talk about. What is the labor cost? You already know labor, it means it is something you pay.
Your slides aren't moving forward.
Is it not move forward? Okay.
No.
Is it now? Is it through?
No.
Oh, okay. Let me just stop sharing. I think it's something to do with the. Wait.
I don't know if anybody else was
let me check.
Slides, but I wasn't.
Okay, let me check whether I'll change the style of it. I'll share the desktop. Okay, can you guys see the thing moving better now? Yeah, perfect. I think it's me, probably something to do with the previous settings I had. Just want to show you this one quickly, just to show you what is the comparison, like how you're going to look at the financial statement and the management accounting. And then look at the next one here when it comes to the labor cost. So the labor cost is what we pay somebody who works for the company or your business, but it's different to person because you may get different rates, you may get different hours, and also you may have different contracts. And they also expectation, there is something. Also expectation. I think somebody's the sound reverberating there. Just bear with us. Yeah, I've got it now. Yeah. And then also the expectation for you to know how the business define what cost constitute which category and which one we're going to be looking at in different what is that again, classifications. That is the word I have to say, how we classify those different labor costs. So let's first look at that here. You can have a labor cost. It can be either a direct cost or an indirect cost. A direct cost, as you know, it should be something variable. It changes with the level of production. Like if you work more hours, you make more items, therefore you end up paying more to the labor. But indirect cost, it does not relate directly to your production. That means it can be fixed. Indirect cost, for example, you pay a salaried staff like a supervisor or somebody who does a fixed term hour contract, they will be paid indirect cost there. Why? Because the production, it's not related to their payment. But somebody who works in the production line or somebody who works for a company who does a service industry, on that service industry, the more services they provide, it will be paid more to them. We can call them as a direct cost. Direct cost has to be something can be directly attributed to the product the business produce or the service the business provides. And that can be calculated as in hourly rate or the number of number of jobs they do. Okay. Indirect cost, on the other hand, it is not relevant to how much production they do. That can be a fixed amount for a period of time. It can say per month, per annum, or per day, fixed. That means doesn't matter how much they do, they get paid that amount. So that could be an indirect cost there. So let's look at further down what we do when we're going to pay somebody who works more than their stipulated hours. So if I have a contract for 30 hours for work and I will get paid an hourly rate for that 30 hours of work, and if they ask me to work anything more than that, to entice an employee to work more than their contracted hours, a company can pay you overtime. But you have to remember, there are a couple of concepts you have to keep an eye out for. We will see a question in a minute why that is important. Overtime is the number of hours worked by the employee in excess of the number of hours set by the organization as the working week. So if I say I work 30 hours, I get, say, £20 an hour. Okay, so if I say I work 30 hours and £20 an hour, my wages for that week supposed to be £600. Don't worry about the taxes or anything like that. That is not part of the calculation here. It's only the cost. It is a stipulated cost. It's going to be £600. For me to work any additional hours, they will not say you have to work for that 20 hours because I have no incentives to work more than my contracted hours. So what the business will offer you, they will give you an increased amount. On that increased amount, we call that an overtime pay. But that overtime pay itself has two elements to it. One of them is their base rate, and then the extra amount they added to that base rate of overtime premium. You have to remember the overtime premium is the extra. So if I say I work for £20 an hour, any overtime they will give me time and a quarter. That means I will get 25% extra on top of my basic rate. So that will be another £5 on top. So my overtime pay will be £25. But that overtime pay has two elements. It has my £20 base rate and the £5 of overtime premium. For you, though, you only care about your overtime pay, altogether £25. For the business, though, it is different. For the business, they have to classify those two things separately. The basic rate in that part, that £20 will be going as a direct cost. The overtime premium itself will be an indirect cost. Unless there is one exemption, the exemption is if that is for a specific order. You are making the labor work overtime for a specific order. That time, your overtime premium will be a direct cost. Otherwise, if it is for general pressure, that means you getting the workers to work overtime because you are generally really busy for normal demand. That time, any overtime premium you pay, which is the surcharge of that extra pounds, yeah, on top of their base rate, this will be classed as indirect. We will see some examples of it later. So here, how the overtime work, you have an overtime and it says time and a half. If they get paid £5 an hour, time and a half is £7.50. But the overtime premium is the extra they pay on that hourly rate. Because here they showed us something ancient because we don't get minimum pay of £5 for many years. I remember that was in 2003. The basic payment was £4.10. I think that's a long time ago. So yeah, I probably remember those times because I remember my first job was actually for a minimum wage, and I was thanking myself, at least I have a minimum wage that time. But nowadays it's like £12 something now, isn't it? So yep, it's gone up 3 times in about 20 something years. Now let's look at how other types of payments towards labor can be calculated. One of them is output related pay. So this one, they call it also piecework. It is a fixed amount is paid per unit of output produced, irrespective of the time taken. So if I'm going to go there, I'm in a production company I'm working for. They ask me to produce a particular item. They say if I produce one whole item, I will get a set amount of money. So if I say I'm going to produce one item, £5. So one item will be £5, 2 items, £10, 10 items is going to be £50, 100 items is going to be £500. So therefore, it increases the payment as long the production also increases. This is a classic example of a variable cost. The variable cost means it increases, the cost itself increases with the production level changing. That means increasing. But the unit cost in this scenario, the £5 per unit we are going to pay them, that is constant. It does not change. So please remember, when I'm saying variable, we're talking about the whole of that cost. So here, another one is piecework with guarantee. So that is kind of a best of both worlds. So if I'm going to say I'll pay you hourly rate and then also I'll give you piecework with guarantee, we will see that later. We're going to give you what is the guaranteed minimum you'll get paid there. We'll see some examples of later. And then on top of that, you also make it something called bonus schemes. What is the bonus schemes are for? It is to encourage the employees or the group to be productive. Therefore, they can qualify for additional payment, such as what you call an individual bonus, group bonus, or organization-wide bonus for exceeding expectations. So therefore, these are the things we're going to look at it in a minute. Okay, so let's see some questions, shall we? So I have here some spreadsheets. So let's work on it. And here I have a really good examples of a question where we may have to use our knowledge of how to identify what is the meaning of the premium and what is the meaning of the overtime pay. So let's have a look at it here. Oxford Limited pays a time rate of £14 per hour to its direct labor for a standard 35-hour week. Any extra hours are paid at time and a half. Basic pay plus an overtime premium equal to half of basic pay. So if I'm going to say here, I'm going to quickly put it here. Basic pay is £14. Okay, so I'm going to put a pound sign on it. So it's going to be £14. So we know that number and how we're going to work that out. So the first thing is for you to identify how we're going to work this number out. The first thing we need to know how many standard hours. They have worked 35 standard hours and they will be getting 3 hours of overtime for this person, 2 hours of overtime for this person, 41 hours of overtime for this person. So what our job is though, when you're going to calculate when it's related to the overtime premium, you please remember all the hours that person works here will be charged at the basic pay when you're going to calculate the basic wage. So here the basic wage will be that times that £14. Why? Because whole of that amount it's going to be charged at the basic £14 an hour. But then also you had to look at it, how much is the overtime premium? Premium is something you pay on top of your basic rate. So how much is your premium here? If I'm going to calculate the premium is going to be equal to that times 50% because it's the half, isn't it? So any extra hours they worked, it will be given £7 extra on those hours. So if I'm going to look at it here, this person worked 3 hours extra. So it's equal to 3 times that, and that is their overtime premium. So their gross wage will be this plus that. In your exam, you need to know this basic formula, adding two cells together. Okay, it is very elementary. Somebody who's doing Excel, this is going to be like nothing, but somebody hasn't done Excel, you need to know. Okay, now let's look at the next one. It is the same query again. Whole of the hours they're going to be paid with the £14 an hour, and the premium is going to be for how many hours? 2 hours. So it's going to be 2 times that number, and that is £14. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the same formula for this person, this plus that, and that gives you £532. So now you know it is a £21 different because the extra 1 hour they worked, they get 14 plus the 7, £21 overtime pay on top of that. So that proves our question. But let's see again what we have. The next one, this number times the £14, that gives you 574. How many hours of overtime they have done is 41 minus 35 is going to be 6 hours. 6 times the £7, that is 42. That is equal to that plus that. Now, once we done that, we found the gross wage. Now, what if your question is done like this way? They are given you basic pay and your overtime. This time, you look at it how they do in your own payslip. So how you get your payslip? Payslip will show you your basic pay. Your basic pay is going to be what? Your basic pay is going to be, it's your contracted hours. So here, this equal to 35 times that number. That is your contracted hours. Is that going to be any difference to anybody? No. It's going to be exactly the same amount for this calculation. So here, that times, not that one, 35 times the number. Yeah, it is going to be 490 basic pay. Everybody get the same basic pay. Your overtime, it's how you see in a pay slip, because what is your overtime pay now? Overtime pay is 14 pounds plus the £7 premium is 21 pounds. So this is going to be equal to the extra hours they have done, 3 times 21 pounds. So here, let's say here, I'm going to say that plus that here. So I won't change that, 63 pounds there. And this one is going to be 2 hours. So it's going to be 2 times that plus that, because overtime, sorry, the basic pay plus the overtime, I should say basic rate. No, basic pay, it's basic rate. And the last one is going to be equal to 6 hours of overtime. So it's going to be 6 times that plus that amount, and it's 126. Let's see what is their gross wages going to be. Do you think that is going to be any different to what you have calculated here? No, it will be exactly same. This plus that. And then can you notice that here? It is exactly the same amount what you have seen before. Why? Because it is only the method we calculate is different. For you, this is direct cost and this is indirect, unless it is what we said before, it is for a specific order. The meaning of a specific order is I know exactly why we're doing the overtime is for one customer's order. They want to produce everything to pass the deadline, and then that can be classed as a direct. Otherwise, overtime you're paying under general work pressure is going to be an indirect cost. Can you see here? The premium is only the extra you pay on top of your basic rate. So therefore, that's £7 time how many hours you've done, so and so and so. So let's look at a couple of more questions here. Okay, so here there is a question for Cambridge Limited uses guaranteed minimum payment method to pay labor in its factory. The labor are paid 90p per unit produced and are also guaranteed a minimum wages of £10 per hour for 35 hours week. Workers will earn guaranteed minimum or the piecework, whichever the higher. So that means you won't be shortchanged. That means they will pay you better if you exceed the production than your minimum wage. So therefore, it is a best of both worlds. So you either get the minimum guaranteed pay or you will get a piecework if it's better production. So let's say have a look at that here. What is the guaranteed basic wage for them? So if you look at that here, everybody worked 35 hours, £10 an hour. So it's going to be what is equal to 35 times 10. It is going to be exactly same for all of them. That is their basic pay. But what is the piecework wage? Piecework wage is going to be that times 90 pence. So it's going to be 278. So I'm going to do the same way. If you notice that here, that's 390 times 90 pence. And then, of course, the last one is going to be 370 times 90 pence. But now what they're asking you here, whichever is the biggest, you're going to get paid. So in this scenario, what is your actual earning? This one or the big one, because they're saying here whichever the highest. So your actual earning going to be 378 for this person, 351 for this person, and 350 for that person. Why? Because in this time the piecework is not giving him enough money, so they will give them the guaranteed basic wage. So that means that is the absolute flow. You cannot go underneath that amount. You can always earn more than 350, but not a single penny under, like Bruce's Price is Right. Yeah, it's the opposite way. Okay, in that time, you have to guess the price lower, not a penny over, but here, not a penny under. So you will get paid a minimum £350 there, regardless of your production. But if you produce more than the amount they required, and then you will get the piecework wage there. And then now let's look at another question here. It says Cheltenham Unlimited uses a time rate method with bonus to pay its direct labor in one of its factories. The time rate is £11 per per hour, and a worker expect to produce 25 units an hour. Anything over this, the worker is paid a bonus of 20 pence per unit. That means if you exceed that threshold of 25 units an hour, if you produce more than that, anything you produce on top of it, you're going to get paid 20 pence bonus. So that means it is going to be what we call again encourage production. It's going to encourage the people to be more productive and produce more than what is their target is. But let's see here how that's going to impact. Also remember, guys, when you're going to do this, there is a catch. Why? The employee might be over enthusiastic. By that way, they might end up producing substandard products. So you have to keep an eye on it. When you do this, there is also an expectation you have to have a good quality control, a setup in place, just to check, make sure everybody is up to standard. So if you start producing substandard items, you end up losing money, and then you're also paying, absorptionate amount of bonus, which is going to be counterproductive for this kind of a scenario there. So they may ask you a theoretical question: what is the downside of the piecework or the bonus payments? Why it needs to have better quality control to ensure the employees are producing something worthwhile. Okay, it's not something that just want to produce substandard items. So let's have a look at that here. We calculate the basic wage, the bonus, and the gross wage for the three workers works in, and they want your answers to 2 decimal places. So let's say here, what is your basic wage? So if they work for £11 an hour, so let's have a look at it here. That times £11, it's going to be 407. So let's say here, I've got all their numbers down now. These are their basic wage. But how much bonus they all qualify? But the problem is now I need to find out, did they produce enough? So what we need to do, we need to calculate what is their per amount of production. That means for every hour they have to make 25 units. So that means for their hours they work, how many units they should have produced. So here in this scenario, let's find out. By 37 times 25, it is going to be 925, 875, and 975. So these are the number of units they should have produced, because A. Smith in this case, he produced only 850 units, but their target was only 925. If that is not met, are they qualified for bonus here? No, there is no bonus for that person. Why? The number is going to be not sufficient to qualify for a bonus. So let's look at the next one. J. Jones. Let's look at J. Jones. They should have produced 875 units, but they produced 975 units. So what is that crack there? They have gone above their required number of productions. That means they are qualified for bonus. Let's work that out. This minus that number, that will be the number of items they have produced in excess. And what is their bonus is going to be? The bonus is going to be for 20 pence per unit. So I'm going to multiply by 20 pence. So here I need to times it. If I do that, it's going to be coming up to £20 bonus. Why? Each unit 20 pence. So if I'm going to do 100 units, that is going to be £20 of bonus. So let's look at the same thing as well. If I'm going to look at this person, how many items they have done more? It is going to be 18 items. If that is going to be 18 items times 20p, that is going to be £9, I think. So let's copy this formula, see whether that comes up to 90. No, no, sorry, it's £3.60. It's 20, isn't it? So it's going to be £3.60. So let's put that into 2 decimal places. So we've done that into 2 decimal places, and all your answers needs to be 2 decimal places. So let's see the gross wage. Gross wage is going to be this plus that. Why that's not coming up as that? Okay, so let's say number 2 decimals. Yeah, but it's fine. We can do just 0 there, because if it's a 0, you don't have to do decimals there. It shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so the whole numbers are these. J Jones got £20 bonus. M Clive get £3.60 bonus, and this is going to be their gross wage after the fact they have done all these productions there. Now let's look at the third question. So this one, it's going to do with the group bonuses. So here, Shoe Time Limited has a number of branches around the country and pays its sales staff a standard time rate of £10 per hour, plus the team bonus to each store if the store sells more than its targeted number of shoes each week. The store earns £2 bonus for every pair of sold above its target. This is divided between the staff in a proportion of how many hours they have worked. So that means if you earn the bonus, it depends on how many hours you do. More hours you do, more share you're going to get there. So that makes sense. And complete the table below to show the basic weekly earning of the staff in the Newcastle branch based on figures given. Show your answers to 2 decimal places. So let's have a look at that here. The basic wage is going to be how much here? This is going to be that times £10 an hour. So let's do that into 2 decimals. And let's do that here. And that is not a problem. We get the sigma sign to get the total. Yeah, £1,000 basic wage. And they're saying here they have worked 250, the target was 250 pairs. On that week, they have sold 296 pairs. So what is the excess? What is the number of pairs they have made? So it's going to be 296 minus 250. That is 46 pairs they are made. So what is the total bonus they're going to receive? So if I'm going to look at the total bonus, this is that number. So the total bonus is going to be equal to that times 2, because every extra shoes you sell, you get £2 per pair of shoes. So therefore, the total bonus is going to be £92. So how I'm going to apportion it between these 3 workers? What do you remember? If you work more, you're going to get more share. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to divide it by the number of hours, the total bonus, which is 100, and then I'm going to times this by that number. So that will give you their share. So their share of the bonus is going to be £37.72. So let me just change that to 2 decimals. So same way I'm going to do that here. This is going to be that divide by 100, which gives you 1 hour worth of bonus, which is going to be 92p. Then you go to times by 36. You're going to have that number. And then the last one is going to be equal to that divide by that times 23 hours, and we have that. So can you see here, if we add these 3 numbers again, you will get this £92 there. So therefore you have done, you split that share of bonus among these 3 employees to get that number. So let's see the gross wages now. What is the gross wage? Gross wage is going to be, add those 2 together, that number there, and that is going to be equal to, just the sigma will do, £1,092. Can you see here? The basic wage plus the bonus of £92 will give you 1,092. So if you add all of those numbers, it gives you that £1,092. Now, this is kind of a bigger question. I want to do this quickly so I can work on how the rates change for different days and different hours. So let's say here, Sophie runs a cleaning company offering domestic cleaning in people's homes and holiday lets. The pays the cleaners a basic rate of £9.50. Any hour works on Saturdays and Sundays are paid at the time and a half, and basic pay plus an overtime premium equal to basic pay plus half basic pay. So here, what they're saying here, show your answers to two decimals. So they're saying here, you get half of basic pay. So half of basic pay of the £9.50 is going to be equal to, so let's put that into two decimals. That's going to be the overtime premium of £4.75. So here, this is your basic, right? And this is your OTP, overtime premium. So overtime pay, overtime rate is going to be equal to that plus that. Okay, just for sake of it, we just keep that number here. So they're asking you to calculate the basic wage. So what here they ask you, scope this question carefully. They're asking for overtime premium. So if they want you the overtime premium, it's the only the excess amount more than your what do you call hourly rate, which is that one, and you times it by how many hours of overtime you've done. So that's straight away I can work that out, this times that number, and then this person is going to have that times the number. This is going to be again that times the number. There will be nothing. This person is going to have overtime premium of that times the number. So can you see here, the overtime premium is the excess they pay on top of your basic wage. So here, if I'm going to look at that, this is going to be all of that hours times by £9.50. I'm going to press that there. I'm going to absolute cell reference it. I'm just going to put it all the way around. Can you see the basic wage? It depends on how many hours these people all work. It will be for whole of their hours. But this is only during the weekday. So what happened to that weekend? This also needed to be added on. So here, when I'm going to do this formula, I'm going to add these extra hours on top of that as well. And I'm going to put that in brackets. So what I'm doing here, I'm considering whole of these hours as your basic wage, because when they ask you to calculate the premium, it's only the extra. So that means all the hours they work, in this scenario 39 hours, it will be paid at least £9.50 an hour for all of that hour. So let's rechange it again. You probably see all the number has changed apart from that person. Can you see that person's number before and after? Can you see that before and after, before and after? How the numbers are changing when you're adding the extra wage they gained by working Saturdays and Sundays. So let's say here, let's put the formula sigma, and that is also that number, and your gross wage is going to be equal to that plus that. So let's add them all together, and then finally sigma again. What is that going to give you? 1444. If I'm going to add these two together as well, you will get that number. Okay, so that is how for level 2 your calculations can be. I'm not sure you may get anything different to this, but anything you may get from this, it is going to be kind of what do you call it again, a derived from these basic ideas of how to calculate different types of wages. So let's have a look at the next part we are covering, which is the overtime, the overheads. So what is the overheads? Same like labor. Labor you pay towards workers who are actually working. Same as you may also have something called materials. Materials are the compounds we use in the production, and there are materials also supporting the production, but we are considering anything which are not materials or labor will be classified as overheads. overheads, for example, are like if you pay rent, insurance, heat and lighting, what do you call what is that again? The paper we not paper. I can't say it's paper. It could be for depreciation. There can be overheads and so many other things. It could be okay. It's like water bills, utilities, telephone. What do you call traveling expenses? Like those things can be classed as overheads. But when we're going to do a costing of a product, those overheads are not directly involved with the production, because if I'm going to ask you how much it costs you to produce an item, I'll be able to tell you by looking at how much material I use and how many hours of labor I'm using. I'll be able to give you a cost there. That is the prime cost, because that cost, it just does not change with every item. Why? It's going to be for that unit, it's going to be same for an identical unit as well. But that is not the only cost. We also have to somehow put the additional costs on top of the prime cost. Otherwise, we cannot give a realistic price for my product there. When I'm going to cost my product, I will just have a a smaller number there, because my overheads are not absorbed. But how I'm going to absorb it? Because that overhead somehow has to be part of my product's price. So therefore, I need to make sure the overheads are first identified, put all together, and then use a certain method to absorb them into the cost of the product there. So for that one, we have a method called overhead absorption rate. Overhead absorption rate is calculated by the budgeted overheads and the cost, that means, divided by the budgeted activity level. For level 2, you learn 3 methods. One of them is by number of units, another one by number of machine hours, third one is number of labor hours. That means the overhead absorption rate will be different for different methods of absorption. In this scenario, there are 3. And then also you have to remember, in the exam, you may be asked to calculate the unit cost or the total cost at a specific production level. When doing this, be careful to distinguish between fixed and variable cost, and do not confuse the total cost and the unit cost, because either or both could be asked for. Therefore, remember that fixed costs are fixed. That is the overall cost. For example, rent is a fixed cost. Why? It does not change because you're changing your production. Your electricity and gas, because you have to keep your lights on, you need to heat your warehouse. Whether you do the production or not, you still have to pay that one. You have to pay what do you call the depreciation for the machinery. It does not matter you use it or not. If you have what do you call a straight line basis, or if you even do diminishing hours basis, method basis, there is something you learn about in level 3. You have to remember the depreciation they charge on the non-current assets, they are fixed for that period. So therefore, you need to make sure you clearly identify what type of cost units they are. So here, let's look at some examples of that question. So here is the question we have now. I also have a stretch question. We may have time. We will do it again. So here, the first question. So here, a company makes several different products. The following budget rates are related to the factory. The first one is the overheads. And there are 2 methods like, the hours we accommodate, we use. One of them is total number of direct labor hours. And another one is the machine hours. And then also once you've done that, we need to cost a particular product called product J with these given information. They're saying here, the material we use cost us £27.80. The direct labor is per hour £12. We charge £30 altogether. We'll get to there later on how they work that out. And then also number of hours I need to use my machine to produce that product there. So that means you need to also do direct labor, and also you have to put it through the machine. So therefore, it's multifaceted operations. How we identify these costs and how I'm going to put the realistic cost scenario when it comes to this product J. Let's follow this cue. So first thing is we need to calculate the overhead absorption rate. So here, overhead absorption rate in this scenario is going to be calculated. Remember the formula? The formula says budgeted overhead divided by the activity. And they're saying here, keep the overhead absorption rate to 4 decimal places of the pound and the overhead absorbed to be the nearest penny. So the rate to be at 4 decimals and anything you absorbed is going to be for 2 decimals, means nearest penny. So let's find out the number they're looking for. The first one is 354,200 divide by 46,200. So can you hear? We are doing the direct labor hours. So budgeted overheads are these. The budgeted activity is that one. Now let's find out what is the rate. Can you see that rate here? The rate is going to be 7.666666 all the way 67. Now, we don't need that many numbers. We need only 4 decimals. So let's reduce that to 4 decimals of 7 pounds 6667. Good. I think my daughters are basically listening to it and then probably doing all those signs there. I don't know. Let the kids be kids, eh? Now, let's look at the next one. We're going to absorb the machine hour method. It is going to be the same number of overheads, but with the machine hours, it's going to be 31,250 machine hours there. And it gives me a absorption rate of 11 pounds 3344. That is automatically the last. It doesn't have any more to identify with. So that is, I don't need to worry about readjusting the decimal. So here is 7.6667, 6667, and then you have 11.3344. Now they ask you to calculate the product J cost. So here the first one is, what is the direct material? What I know about direct material, it's been given already. So £27.80, £27.80. Is that going to be any different to me? No. Why? Because that is what is material cost for one particular unit. But what method I'm going to absorb my overheads, this is what the difference is going to be. So you may get 2 different costs. Our job is to just to find the cost, not to make a decision of what price I'm going to set. That is your boss's job or your line manager's job. Your job is to identify the cost, absorb the overheads, and then find the total cost. That's it. You're level 2, guys. You're not going to go anything above and beyond you're needed there. Okay, so let's look at the next one. £30 labor and £30 labor. It does not change. You simply copy those 2 numbers. But now I need to absorb using direct labor hours. So if I want to absorb the overheads, I absorb by number of activity I have done times the overhead absorption rate. So in that case, whatever that is, by how long it took us to make that particular product, and then direct labor hour in this scenario. So in that case, if I'm going to look at it here, it's £30 we're paying labor, but they only pay £12 per hour. So how many hours of labor they use there? It is easier if you find out 30 divided by 12, it's going to be 2 hours and 30 minutes. So per hour, I can absorb £7.6667. So how much overheads I'm going to absorb if I use for 2.5 hours? So I'm going to use that here, that times the 2.5. That gives me £19.17 to 2 decimals. You guys got that now? So that is the overheads I absorbed using the direct labor hour. But what if I'm doing with the machine hour? Per hour, how much we charging? £11.3344. Now, for 1 hour, that is the rate. So how much for 2 hours? It is times that by 2, because they have given us how many hours they use here. So it is going to be £22.67. And what is the total cost in that scenario? The total cost is going to be whatever you have on those 3 cells added together. And it gives you, with the labor method, £76.97. With the machine hours, £80.47. But sometimes they will ask you, what is the best method to absorb? I normally go with which one took us longer. So in this scenario, the direct labor hours took us longer than the machine hours. That means they have more time, means the margins when there is a fluctuations are less. If you have less hours, when there is a change, the margins could be fluctuating too much. But when the time is longer, that means which is the most intense, means more hours used in that particular production. Which method it is, I will choose the direct labor method. That's something you will learn in the future. But whichever the most intensive, that is the method I will be using. But here they didn't ask you that, so don't worry about it. But most likely it will be a clear disparity between the labor and the machine hours. Okay, so if there's whichever it is more what do you call manual labor involved, that will be the direct labor hour. If the process is mostly automated, I use the machine hours as the absorption method. Okay, so that is the decision making you do between different rates there. So I have another question here. Can you see here? A company makes a single style of wooden ride-on tractors for children. Budgeted costs for the next year are as follows. Direct material for tractor is £16. Direct labor, why that is a bit different. Give me 1 second. Let me just slightly reduce it. Yeah. And direct labor are 2 hours times £14 per hour. Total overheads are £42,000. Budgeted outputs of unit is 1,200. So they're saying here, calculate the budgeted overhead absorption rate using the units output method. So if I'm going to do the units output method, what is the formula? The formula is budgeted overheads divided by budgeted activity. Budget of activity here in this scenario is the number of unit. It is only possible if you use only one type of product. So that means everything you do is exactly same. So this company makes a single style. That means they don't do anything else. Their job is same thing, producing the same time, same thing over and over again. Do you think you're going to have different time for different products? No, it's only one time. Every one of that takes you 2 hours. So therefore, it's easier using the unit absorption method. So let's say here, the rate is going to be £42,000 divided by 1,200. That gives you £35 overhead absorbed per unit. So here, overhead absorbed per unit is £35. Now let's look at the next one. What is the direct material? It's going to be £16. Let's see here. Everything needs to be 2 decimals. So I'll choose that to 2 decimals here. How much is the labor? It's going to be 2 times £14. It's going to be 28. Overhead absorption. Now what we remember, every unit we have done, we're going to absorb the overheads using what we calculated in part A. So that is going to be equal to that 1 unit calculation. So here that's going to be equal to that, which is 35 quid. And then what is the total cost? Then add them all together. That gives you 79. It only works if the product is only one type. If you do multiple different product, I could not use the unit absorption method. Why? Because it is irrelevant, because some of the items may take 10 hours, another one takes 1 hour. So it's not fair. I absorb the same amount of overheads for all the different units when they are really different, because it's going to be taking longer, means I need to be putting more overheads towards it. Then something it can be produced in lesser time. So that is the reality there. Now let's look at the last question of this part. This one, it's the multifaceted, like if you have multiple production areas, and then also we have to use different calculation methods. So they ask you which one I'm going to be using. So here you may have to make a choice. So here they're asking you, what is the budgeted indirect cost? So here, fabrication, the budgeted indirect cost is going to be 143,700, and the assembly is 95,200. So they're asking you here, the budgeted direct labor hours in this scenario, how much are they? 35,800. and 24,600. This is the labor hours. So how to find the overhead absorption rate? This is going to be again the cost divided by the activity level. Again, in this scenario, they're using the labor method now. So let's say here, it is a labor method I'm going to be using. So I'm going to be absorbing just with the labor method. So let's say here, it is going to be 4 point something here, but they want you to have absorption rates and they all numbers are to be 2 decimals. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply change that to that. It's going to be £4 and a penny. And now let's look at the next one. The next one is going to be equal to that divide by that, and that is going to be that £3.90 87 pence here. It will be £3.87. Can you see these two numbers now? This is the numbers I'm going to be using when I'm going to calculate how much overhead I'm going to be absorbing here. So how many hours of labor I used? So in the fabrication, according to this, I used 5 hours of direct labor. In the assembly department, I use 1 hour and 30 minutes. So we can translate that into 1.5 hours. So here they want you to have the overhead absorption rate here, which is going to be £4 and a penny. And this one is going to be £3.87 because these two department has two different rates of absorption. So these two rates of absorption now, I'm going to be absorbing how much overhead. So let's say here on the fabrication department overheads, I'm going to be absorbing going to be this times that. The £20 and 7 pence of overhead I'm absorbing in the fabrication department. How much overhead I'm going to be absorbing from assembly? 1.5 hours times £3 87 pence, which gives you £5 and 80. No, it will not be £5.80, £3.87. Yeah, it is going to be £5.81, 4.01. Yeah, so this should be the right number because in the computer, this one is basically a bigger decimals. So when you're moving the number over, just copy the number instead of the formula. So if I'm noticing that here, initially what I done, I just copied that same calculated number from here to here, and this will give me a different number. But if I just copy the real number, which is 4 penny and £3.87 pence, this is the number we're going to get. Remember, guys, in the computer, it works out the decimals for you. But in the real life, you use whatever the number we have put it down as the OAR. OAR, the rate, it's not changed for any other thing because this is the rate we charge per labor hour. This is not what we pay our labor. Please remember that. That is your labor rate, what we learned earlier. This one is basically what we are charging to absorb our overheads within the cost of the product now. So they're asking you here, what is the total number of overheads I absorbed? It's going to be this plus that. That will be £25 and 86 pence for that one of the products they're talking about. We don't know what is the name of it yet. Sorry, it's the product Q. Product Q will have £25 86 pence overheads absorbed now. Okay, well done. Now I have a little bit of a time because I did promise there is a stretch question we have here. We can practice this before we finish the day today because this one involves two different overtime rates. This is why I called it a stretch activity. So let's bring the question up a little bit very clearly. They're here. Employees work in a team of 5 in a manufacturing department of Spirelli Limited. They are paid a basic rate of £12 per hour, and any overtime is paid at the following rates. Overtime rate 1 is base pay plus 50%, which is in that case £6 premium, altogether £18. Overtime rate 2, it's going to be double pay. So what is the meaning of that? Double pay means 12 times 2, that's going to be £24. So they're asking you here, there is a target for manufacturing each month And the bonus of 10% of the basic hourly rate is paid for each and unit produced in excess of the target. So that means 10% of your basic hourly rate is £1.20 for 1 unit. That will be the bonus they're going to pay you. So if you do 10, you'll get £12 bonus, but that is for the whole department. So here they're saying the target for the April is 2,000 units, and the team managed to exceed it by another 500 more by producing 2,500 units. So they're saying here all the team members work the same number of hours, and all overtime and bonuses are included as part of the direct labor cost. So if I'm going to look at it here, all the overtime and the bonuses are included as a part of the direct labor cost. What it says there, guys, that could be because it is a specific order. So they knew the extra overtime they worked and the quantity of goods they produce, they could be identified for a particular order. Therefore, I can say all of the cost is the direct labor cost. So they're saying here, complete the gaps in the table below to calculate the total labor cost for the team on April. So here, what is the basic pay? Basic pay £12 an hour. So that is going to be equal to that times 12. Because that's it, simple as that. Because here, they didn't ask you the premium. They didn't see a word of premium anywhere. Can you see premium anywhere? No. If there is no premium, that means we can consider whole of that amount. Same as you see in your payslip. The easy way to remember it, guys, premium, it's internal. Overtime rate is for external. For people like me, I only care about my external. Like for me, I don't care about it. But the managers will care about the direct labor, indirect labor, because that's how their budgets are all set out. Now they're saying here, what is the overtime rate for the next one? So here, overtime rate 1. So here, let's just say here, overtime rate 1. And that's overtime rate 2. Yeah, next one is overtime rate 1. So let's do that number here. That times £12 an hour times 1.5, because it's the time and a half, isn't it? So if it's time and a half, you have to multiply by 1.5 or 150%. Why? Because it is going to be the basic pay plus the overtime. So here it's going to be for £720. We can prove it. We can prove it. Why? Because it's going to be £18 an hour, because it's £6 overtime premium. So equal to 40 times 18, that gives you 720. It's the same number here. Now let's look at the overtime rate too. So this one is going to be £15 an hour, 12 times 2, because this is the double pay. If it's going to be double pay, they will get £24 an hour. So the amount is going to be £360 there. Good. And they're saying here, what is the total before the bonus? What is the total before the bonus? Is going to be equal to these three numbers all added together. So let's do a sigma quickly. It's going to be 5,880. So how much bonus they'll be qualified for? So the bonus they will be qualified for, it'll be for 500 units, because it's the excess of their target. 500 times £12 an hour, which is their basic rate, and 10% of it. So I'm going to times it by 10% of that one. Now, if I do that, this should give me £600. Yeah, it gives you £600 bonus. And what is the total you're paying those employees, including the bonus? This plus that, altogether the total cost will be £6,480. They're asking you here, calculate the total labor cost of manufacturing 1 unit in April to 3 decimal places. So if I'm going to look at it here, I know for a fact now it cost me £6,480 to produce how many units? 2,500 units. So how much is the cost for 1 unit? They're asking you that. Divide by 2,500 units, and it gives me £2.592p. Okay, it's basically 3 decimal places there. If your decimals are not coming up, you can increase and decrease it from this way. And then also they're giving you an option to look at the further calculations there. The basic pay and the overtime for each member of team in April was what? So if I'm going to look at that here, how many members of staff they have? So if I'm going to look at that here, it's a team of 5. So what they here, they're talking about the basic pay and the overtime for each member of staff is going to be equal to that divide by 5, because that is the for each and every member. That is not the bonus. They didn't ask you about the bonus. It is the total of your basic pay and the overtime for each members. So it is going to be £1,176. And they're asking you here, what is the bonus payable for each team members was, if I'm going to say £600 for whole of the team, for each members, how much is going to be divided by 5, as we done earlier as well, £120 bonus. So therefore, the calculations are, you have to remember, read the questions, what they're asking you as well. Sometimes one student have actually this number, they divided by 5 and put that number there. And that makes no sense, because that is not what they asked you. They asked you, what is your basic pay plus the overtime? So be careful, guys, there. You may be very good with your numbers, but you need to be answering what they actually asked you. So in this scenario, it is going to be just the amount before the bonus. That is the number here. And this is the each member of staff's individual bonus, and that £120 there. Okay. And yeah, that is it for today. And wonderful. I have a lot of people attended today's sessions by the look of it. So thank you again, guys. I certainly appreciate your time today. And be sure to go to my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click on that subscribe. Put down your comments and compliments, whatever you have towards those videos. And then, of course, I'm looking forward to come back to you in a few weeks' times. We are going to be covering the material side of the costing unit, where we're going to learn about how to cost issues and what is that again, like with different methods of inventory valuation calculations, like FIFO, LIFO, AFCO. We're going to learn about those all in that particular session. So that will be in 3 weeks' time. I'm assuming that will be on the 11th of May. Thank you. Certainly appreciate that today, Emma. And yeah, by the way, please, you guys have what do you call, wish Emma and Dean the very best of luck, guys, because those two are stars of the show. For most of the time, you're looking at it, they're here all their time, their spare time, not all their time, because they have their jobs to do as well. But most of their spare time, they're here supporting students, and they've been nominated for the PQ Awards. What do you call in awards there? One of them is for the tutor, and another one for the student champion. So we are so proud to have you guys in our ranks as well. And you guys absolutely, whichever it is there, you will be the winners in our hearts. So I'll put it that way. And then hopefully, guys, good luck next week. And yeah, I can't say anything else but that one, because I certainly feel like I'm kind of a gobsmacked, how long